And welcome back to the Immigration Ain't Easy podcast. You can find it at immigrationainteasy.com. My guest for this episode is David Osser, who is my favorite Dutchman. In fact, just so you know, David, I attended Hofstra University, and when I went there, their nickname was the Flying Dutchman.
Right.
And our flower was the what flower?
Well, it might be a tulip.
A tulip. Yes, that was the flower. So the reason I brought David on is because he has a very interesting backstory that I'm going to have him talk about. He came to the United States from the Netherlands in 1986, came here to pursue a career potentially in theater, film, and television as a writer, producer, actor, and director, like many people try to do. And he wound up as a lowly immigration lawyer. And became an immigration lawyer in 1996. And David and I met probably, I would say, in the mid 2000s, like around 2005 or 2006. And we've remained friends, believe it or not. And I've really appreciated having you as an ally in this immigration law field. And so I thought, your story is very interesting because it's unique. And so let's just start with that. So you grew up in the Netherlands, right?
Yeah, I come from a Jewish background, born in 1961. So definitely a few years after the war, but second generation still. My parents survived the Holocaust, both in hiding, but in different places. They were boyfriend, girlfriend when the war broke out.
Where were they taken?
So
where were they hiding?
So both my parents were born in Amsterdam in 1922. And when the war broke out in 1940, so 1941, I think they went into hiding. My mother comes from a very anti-authoritarian household, very artistic. My grandmother had already Jewish refugees, actually not only Jewish refugees, but German refugees in her house before the war. So my mom knew when she was like 12, 13, that something was brewing, did not know exactly what. But my grandmother, who was a single mom, because my grandfather, he was a philanderer and he had already passed away a long time ago. He was an older man. He had lived in a commune. He was an actor who actually went to Russia in 1917 as one of the first Western European actors to show his allegiance to the communist Lenin regime. Very interesting. I don't know him, but my mom saw the horrific events coming, and she was 17 years old, and basically forced my dad also to leave his parents, my grandparents, who believed, well, if we just do what the Germans say, we'll be fine.
We'll be okay.
We'll be okay. And so he had a huge fallout with his dad. He left. He became a nurse in a Jewish insane asylum in the east part of Holland, and worked there, and then sent for my mom, who became a maid. And so he was a nurse, she was a maid, like they're 18 years old, 19 years old, whatever. And they worked there in the insane asylum. He has a lot of adventures that he's written down, actually. And in January of 1943, the Germans surrounded the insane asylum, and there was a huge discussion among staff as to what we do. Do we go to Poland with all the patients, or do we escape? And my mom, being the anti-authoritarian and the brave one, said, "I'm not staying. and told my dad, well, you can stay or you can go with me. And they escaped the night before the Nazis basically put all the people on a cattle car and drove that cattle car through a gas tunnel, and nobody arrived in Poland. But my parents did escape and then had to split up, and my dad hid on a farm somewhere in the north of Holland, and my mom endured all kinds of hardships being in hiding in the middle part of Holland. And so when they came out of the war, they were like 22 years old, and everybody was gone. So no parents, no sisters, no brothers, no uncles. Everybody was gone. There was one great aunt, or my great aunt, left, but that was it. So no family, and my parents had to start over. So an immigrant story, in a sense, that yes, they came home, but they were outcasts. They didn't get any help from the Dutch government, and had to reinvent themselves. And my dad became a television writer. Well, first he became a journalist, then he became a radio writer, then he became a TV comedy writer, and so I grew up in a very artistic household. My dad's background was not artistic. He came from very humble beginnings. My grandfather sold razor blades, I think, or suspenders on the market, and they lived in the slums, the Jewish, the
Like a
Amsterdam
ghetto
Jewish
sort of.
slums. I
Yeah.
mean, they were, seriously poor. Um, but my mom came from an artistic background, and and saw that, I think, in my dad, who was, he could write beautiful poems. So I grew up in an artistic household, and in the 60s in Amsterdam, it was great. It was beautiful. I mean, everything was wonderful. But it turned. In the 70s, it turned. And for the first time in my life in 1970, I would say 4 or 75, somebody started using anti Semitic slurs. And I'm 13, 14 years old. I had no idea what this guy was talking about. But they basically said, okay, we forgot to gas your parents. And
Was this a
that,
widespread national, like nationalistic mentality? Like
no,
what
it was,
drove that?
we had moved outside of the safe zone of Amsterdam.
Amsterdam. So you were out in
I was out in the
the
boonies,
boonies, yeah.
and which is most of Holland. And so then I realized I don't really belong here. I'm not the white guy.
Yeah.
I am white, but
You're different.
I'm different. So that's when the bug started with me. Is I got to get out of here. If I want to make something out of my life, this is not my place. And when I was 17, so this is the first time that I went to the United States, I I, I did a road trip, and I went from New York to Key West, and had the craziest adventures. I was on a Greyhound bus, and I don't know why my parents allowed me to do this, but basically for 2 months is what I remember. I was on a bus, and everything. My backpack got stolen. I had an encounter with a shark. I also had an encounter with a pedophile, which was also very interesting. It was just um, a, a, an adventure that I thought, well, this is where I want to be, because
Yeah,
there was
it's
so
great.
much freedom, and I really truly loved it. And there was something special about just connecting with people in the States that was very different than in Holland. Nobody knew who I was. And still, people were hospitable. They bring you in, and I had heard, of course, of the American dream and that everything
Yeah.
is possible. But it felt like that when I was here for the first time.
Let
So,
me ask you before you get to the next point. When you say your mom was in hiding, can you
mhm.
describe, like, was she just in a one place for a lot, like years, or like what was that like for her? Like,
She hasn't really
she
opened
talk
up
about it? Yeah.
about the actual facts because I think there was a lot of trauma there. And being in hiding for her, I don't think meant, oh, I'm being kept safe by people. No, she was abused. And she had to make herself useful in whatever capacity, whether that was sewing, working,
Was
or
she hiding
sexually.
in a friend's house or a
No,
stranger's, or
strangers, of course,
really? And
and
they just took
horrible people.
advantage of her
Absolutely.
and her fear.
Yes.
And then how did your parents reunite after the war? Like, I
It's
mean, we're not
amazing.
talking about the 1990 late 90s into 2000s where we had cell phones and we could like find people on
Yeah,
there,
I
you know.
think there was an underground courier service. So there were people that were in the resistance, and and that's how they were able to send letters to each other and kind of knew where they
Communicate.
were. Um, all those letters were censored, of course. They were first self-censored because you couldn't give away where you were hiding, but then they were also censored by the resistance. And I have some of those letters, and it's really interesting. But how they really found each other? Well, Holland's not a very big country, so I'm sure people in the resistance say, "Hey, um, he's over here and she's over there," and they
Yeah.
so after the war, they got married in September of 1945. So
Yeah. It
they
was
got
quick.
together, and what's kind of cute is that their wedding bands are the rings that you use to hang up curtains with.
Oh, really?
They're wooden rings
Wow.
because they had no money, so they got
Well, it's Amsterdam, so wooden
wood.
rings
Yeah,
works
wooden.
perfect. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
of course it's wood,
yeah.
but there's so many questions. I mean, do you have, or did they have photos of when they reunited, or portraits or anything like that? Like,
I have a wedding photo. That's
okay,
about it.
but did they ever talk about what it was like for them, like emotionally, to reunite after these times of fear where they thought they may never see each other again?
Well, it's not that linear. It's
Hmm.
the weirdest thing. When I grew up, we didn't really talk about it. I knew I had a general idea. We had Memorial Day in Holland, which was is May 4th, and every Memorial Day you have to be silent at 8 o'clock for 2 minutes. And so, as a young kid, I'm silent with my parents for 2 minutes, mourning. They are mourning. I have no idea what I'm supposed to mourn, but I knew, it was tough, and I knew my parents would be crying for 2 minutes, but we never talked about it. It was later in life, much later in life, that my dad told his. So this is why I was going full circle. Why it was so important to go to the States too, because in 19. So I'm skipping a little bit here, but in 1988, I'm working for an actor in uh, in Hollywood. He was a great guy. He is a great guy. He's still alive. His name was Barry Primus, or is Barry Primus. And listen,
You keep killing him. I
yeah,
mean,
I
come
don't
on,
know.
dude.
He's a really good. He was a good. And I was just his personal assistant and doing some, I was sending out bills or paying his bill, whatever. I did checks but it was fun. And my parents came to visit, and that was the first time that my dad told the story about his adventures in the insane asylum. And this is so how it's so not linear and so weird because my dad is first a playwright that was and second anything else, so he saw an opportunity to sell his story to this actor in Hollywood, and that's when he finally opened up about the story, and then we wrote it down and I've learned more about it. But the true emotion to go where you're asking what you're asking about, that has never been revealed because it was not just about reuniting with my mom. It was also coming to terms with the fact that he abandoned his parents and his little sister,
Hmm.
and they didn't make it.
Yeah. And so
And
did he live with a lifetime of guilt over that?
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
But that's why he was such a good comedy writer.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
because how do you cope with
yeah,
pain?
and I've learned
It's
that,
being
and
funny.
and this is why I was never able to hold a job because I also deal with adverse situations with
Sure.
humor, and
Get you in trouble.
it always got me in trouble because people think, oh, this guy's not serious.
Yeah.
He laughs about everything, and nothing is a problem. It served me well to survive. It's a great survival technique. It's not a great way to keep a job.
Well, so speaking of jobs, I mean, I'll ask you a question about your work in the film and that sort of industry in a second. But
Sure.
your dad, his story was it developed into a screenplay and ever produced into a film, or?
Yes. It was produced, but it was mostly theater, and he also wrote but it was not really his story. He always fictionalized everything, which I have two older sisters are extremely upset about still because we never heard the
The
truth.
real true story?
Yeah, it's always it's kind of true, but then he wouldn't use his own name, and so we always got this fictionalized version of the truth, and that's kind of how I grew up. Everything was always a story, so what really happened, we don't know, and it's kind of strange to grow up that way because you have to create your own truth based on half facts,
Yeah, because
which
you're not living in full reality.
you don't live in full reality, which also creates a lot of tension between family members who basically create their own version, and they're all not the same version of events. And and that was another reason why I left. I mean, it was
So So you traveled the US and you were here from like 86 to 1990, and
yeah, I
then you
traveled.
went back to the Netherlands, right?
Yes. So I came first as a tourist, then and I was at 17. And then I went to law school because I wanted to go to the States right away. I graduated high school. And I remember my mom sitting me down in the kitchen. She says, oh, it's fine. And you can go to the States, but you got to get a degree first. And then you can go and do whatever you want. And in Holland, you don't have a bachelor's degree program at that time. I don't. I think it's changed. So you decide when you're 18 what you're going to be. And I decided that I didn't want to be a psychologist, and I didn't want to be a sociologist. I wanted to be a psychiatrist, but then I realized I had to go to med school, and by then I would be 29 years old. And I thought, that's the end of the world. I'm 18. I can't wait that
Half your
long.
life is over
Yeah,
then.
my life is over. So I chose law because I thought that was a quick way to get to the States. It's only 7 years. That's what that. And I actually did it fast. I was 24 when I graduated law school, and then I went to the States. And I basically had another road trip. It was really great through the Appalachian Mountains and through Texas. And I went with a guy that was a bit older, and he had been here for a while, so he drove, and it was great. And then in California, I, through a friend, I did an audition at the Lee Strasberg Film and Theater Institute and got accepted for crying out. So then I had to go back to Holland and raise money. So I went back to Holland and worked as a museum guard, and I worked in a dental warehouse, whatever. And then I came back and I went to school, and it was such a
So when
great
did you
time.
come back to the States? What
It
year
was
was
about
that?
87.
Okay.
So, and then,
Was it? Did you come here to get your master's in
no,
law?
no, no, no. It was
Or
just, I always wanted to be an actor.
oh, so it
Um,
was theater based
yeah, I
then?
was the theater school, and I had an F1 student visa, and and I had it for a year, but then I couldn't pay the tuition for the second year. So guess what? I stayed, and
A
yeah.
lawbreaker.
So I worked at a pizza place. I worked in a flower. My first job was in a flower shop, but my boss was so cross-eyed that I never knew what he was looking at. Um, and this was West Hollywood,
That
and
can be very
it was a
distracting.
very interesting time. And but you know, I loved it. I wasn't making any money. I was very poor, but I enjoyed every minute of it. I was and then I became a prep chef in a restaurant, which was so I learned how to deal with produce. You know, very important.
Sure.
And
I mean,
that
is
was
there a
my,
job you haven't held in your life?
no,
It
I was a
seems like you've
plumber.
had every job.
I was a plumber, and I was so bad that I just left a huge hole in somebody's house. And I had to get a real plumber to fix it. And that was when I witnessed my first dead person, because I was under the house fixing the. It was so dangerous. We were plumbers, but there was a lot of electricity, and we were just working there. And suddenly, a head appeared um, through the floor, and there was a sheriff saying, "You guys better get out of here." And it was because the electrician had electrocuted himself under the sink, and they were doing chest compressions. And
Was this was a person who had just died or had just,
yeah, no, we were under
you
the
know,
house, well, we had no idea.
and that
But
person was under there doing electrical work and got fried. And how did the sheriff end up get it? Like, did one of you guys call, or how did
no,
they know?
maybe neighbors called or somebody else, but we had no idea
That
because
is
we were,
insane.
yeah. And the other plumber, he was actually a pastor, and this was his sidekick, or maybe the pastor was his sidekick. Either
What
one.
year was this?
So this
Like
is
in the
all in the
early
first year that
90s
I get here,
or in the 80s? Okay.
1987. I mean, I was a plumber. I was a
So,
Shabbos goy too, by the
but
way.
all right, but hold on a second. You
Hold on.
said that was the first dead person. How many dead people have you seen?
Well, since then I've seen more dead people just getting older.
Oh, okay, okay. I was
But this,
wondering if you just keep running into
no, no,
like
no. But I have
corpses and
never because, and this may be why I'm thinking that I had no family, so I've never experienced death myself until
exactly.
that moment.
I had the same situation. Like I never experienced death until my grandfather died,
Sure.
and that wasn't until like the 2005 or so, somewhere. Yeah, it was like '06 or something like that. I mean, at that point, I'm a full blown adult. And because I had no family growing up that I was really, acquainted with, I never saw any or heard anything,
No,
and it just, it's kind of a shock to the system
it
all of a
was
sudden.
crazy. I had no. Yeah, it was
That's
bizarre.
wild.
So, yeah, you asked me, did I do every job? Yes, I did. I was
That's amazing.
the other job that I did was selling magazines to truck drivers over the phone, cold calling, and so I'm here in the States with my Dutch accent, and I trying to sell a truck magazine over the phone to someone in Texas.
Did
And
you have success doing that,
no,
or
no, I
it
lasted.
sounds like a horrible
It was
marketing idea?
I was on commission, and so I did all of that. I was a voiceover actor for movies, but it didn't pay. I was the director for a Dutch theater company in Anaheim. There was like a community theater. Uh, it was fun, but yeah. So all of this is 87, 88, and then I meet my future wife, and
Fixed your
I,
papers.
well, I did get my green card correct, but she wanted to go to Holland because she thought that if we stay in the States, she would never understand where I'm from. And she wanted to at least go and visit. And we said, okay, um, let's do that. Um, we had 2 duffel bags. We went to Holland, and we thought, well, we're going to stay for a couple of years. But then we had 2 kids, and we stayed. And so I lost my green card, gave it up, uh, abandoned my conditional residence. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'm not going to come back. And I worked in film and theater. It was a really good time, but I had 2 kids, and my wife basically was home alone with these 2 children because in the morning I would be rehearsing for a play. In the afternoon, I maybe do a gig. And then in the evening, I'll be on the road doing a play. And if I wasn't doing a play, which didn't pay any money, I would be doing some TV or whatever. So that wasn't the long-term plan. And I got a job doing some legal work, and that was in television, and that was really a great job. It was a really fun job, but it also didn't pay any money. And through that job, I got the gig. I still call it a gig. It was a lifetime appointment, but I became the press secretary on immigration issues in Holland for the Justice Department. And that was the worst job I've ever had.
And why is that?
Well, 3 days into
Structure?
well, yes. I mean, I was at basically you're at the highest levels, right? You're at the level of
A lot of pressure.
well, yeah, you're representing the Justice Department, but just like here, it's a third rail. Nobody wants to talk about immigration, and even though this is 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? I can't do the math.
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody had my back as a press secretary because the Justice Department wanted to be as far away from that topic as possible. And the Immigration and Naturalization Service, that was what it was called, yeah, they were bureaucrats trying to do their job, and they really didn't want any press. Plus, they also felt abandoned by the Justice Department. And what was crazy, it was on the other side of the street. So there were 2 buildings, one with the Justice Department, which was my boss, and the other one was the Immigration Service, where I was stationed and was representing, and nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. And I was just crossing the street back and forth for guidance. Wow. I had no idea what
you were just, and you taught in your bio, it talks about some of the challenges, the issues that you were dealing with.
Yeah.
It says here, Iranian asylum seekers went into a highly publicized hunger strike. Right. Somali nationals out of protest set themselves on fire.
They did
in front of government buildings. Anti-immigrant sentiments were rampant. Planes loaded with undocumented or illegal immigrants from Sri Lanka landed in Holland, and then all but a few of them had disappeared, and there was corruption and fraud that was rampant within the service. And you were the spokesperson for the Justice Department during this time?
So to give you an idea about the Iranian hunger strike, so these people literally starved themselves to death, so they ended up in the hospital. And I remember on a primetime news show that they had a split screen where they had released one of the hunger strikers out of the hospital, but he was still had an IV in his arm and he was in a wheelchair. And so he's, say, on the left side of the screen, and he gets up out of that wheelchair and takes his IV out of his arm and says, "I'd rather die than go back to Iran." And then it goes to split screen. You got the press secretary for the Justice Department, me, in his gray suit with his funky tie saying, "Oh, it's all fine. It's an isolated incident." I mean, what the hell? It was a terrible position to be in, and I didn't have the balls or the knowledge to challenge any of the status quo because I didn't. I was 38 years old, I guess. No, I was younger. I was like 35, and I didn't have the background. I was a theater guy. I
But
was
how did you get this job?
because I had a friend who had a
I was gonna
job.
say like your plumbing
Yeah,
experience, the pizza
I
experience. Like
mean,
your resume does not seem to
no,
add
people.
up to press secretary of the
Well,
Department of Justice.
no, but nobody in his right mind with the right education and the
Wanted that
right back
job.
wanted that job. And they went through press secretaries like all the time because they all ended up being sick. So this idiot who has no idea, who thinks, oh, I have two kids and a wife, and I
Sounds like
need,
a great gig.
sounds like a gig to me. And dumb, 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 dumb. But
So what was at the time were the people of Amsterdam and the Netherlands at large protesting the immigration laws? Like what was the biggest issue that was happening at that
well,
time?
and see, this is where I'm a little naive, I guess, also being from Amsterdam, because this job wasn't in Amsterdam. This job was in
The
The Hague.
Hague. Yeah.
And Holland is not Amsterdam, and Amsterdam is not Holland. So there is a huge anti-immigrant sentiment in Holland
Outside of that,
outside of the safe haven of Amsterdam.
kind of like what happened with you with the anti-Semitic situation.
Absolutely.
Like,
And
yeah, there's a
yeah,
much more isolated, larger city population, urban center, and then everybody else, which we
yes.
see all the time.
Yeah, I mean, this is then. I mean, things have changed dramatically, but at that time, so the anti-immigrant sentiment is, I would say, 85% of the population. At not, and I would say when I say anti-immigrant sentiment, I don't mean racist at all. But they just have this feeling that this is our land.
Being
We've been
invaded.
here,
Yeah.
and everybody that's not like us, please get out. But then there's also the other side of Holland that's extremely welcoming. I don't want to do a Holland bashing here because I love Dutch people. But that is a really weird dichotomy. It's really because there was so in Amsterdam at the same time there was a very pro immigrant sentiment. There was a family that was being evicted or deported from Holland, and he was a tailor, and that was a national scandal. They wanted to deport him back to Turkey with his family, but these kids were Dutch kids. But in Holland, you don't have birthright citizenship, so so nobody's then Dutch. So this great idea of getting rid of birthright citizenship is like setting yourself up for major disaster. We can talk about immigration, but uh, so that was called the Gummis affair. His name was Gummis, but I don't know what eventually happened. So you had the pro immigrant sentiment, and those were some of the newspapers that were really pushing that. Then you had the pro sentiment, pro immigrant sentiment with the Iranian hunger strikers, rightfully so. How the hell can you remove these people back to Iran? And then you had this whole anti-immigrant sentiment as well. And I got sick.
I was
I
going
mean,
to
I
say
couldn't handle
99.
it.
Did you burn out?
I burned out. I had issues also with my family. Um, it became unsustainable. So I got so sick that I had a pulmonary embolism, and I landed in the hospital. And I was like, well, I may survive, I may not. I mean, I'm going to have to make that decision on a Thursday. I remember on a Thursday night, I was on morphine, and it was like, yeah, I either live or I die. And I had a dream that said, I don't want to leave these kids. My kids were 6 and well, they were younger. Yeah, they were really young, and
Are they both boys or a boy and a
I
girl?
have a boy and a girl.
Okay.
My oldest is Rebecca. My son is Ben, and I made the decision to be a dad again, and I survived that night. But that also meant we had to get out of there. So I am not a refugee, definitely not. But I had to get out, and my wife sponsored me again for a green card.
So you're a two-time sucker
Yeah,
into the immigration
yeah.
system of the
So
United States. And you came here in what, 99?
98.
98? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I remember December 15, 1998. We came, and I had no idea what I was going to do. My in-laws were I mean, they were really nice and
Gracious.
let us stay in an apartment in Huntington Beach. And I worked at Guitar Center for a day, but selling musical instruments. That
Wow.
was not for me.
Another job
Another job.
that to put on your resume.
Yeah,
You do need to, like, I don't know if you have it, but you should do like an Excel spreadsheet of
yeah,
every
it's too
job you've
many.
done.
Too many. And then I worked a day at the Orange County Register as a journalist, and they asked me to cover the city council in Newport Beach. And I was like, oh, this is great. So I went to city council meeting in Newport Beach, and I wrote a huge article. And the editor goes like, dude, I need 3 lines. And
Yeah, you're not getting that much copy
no,
in the
yeah.
paper there.
So that was one day, and that was $30. And then I landed a job in an immigration law firm through the Yellow Pages. Just cold calling. Just, hey, do you have a job for me?
And that was that the what John Alcorn's
Yeah,
firm? Okay.
John gave me a shot
Okay.
and said, okay, you can come work for me. I'll give you $100 a day. We'll see how it goes.
And what
And
type of immigration was it? Employment based
no, he was a
immigration
general
or
practitioner.
okay?
He was a former JAG, and it was a play. He was the John passed away, so John was a great guy, a great teacher, a fantastic immigration lawyer, and the most horrible boss I've ever had.
But the good news is he gave you direction and a purpose.
Oh yeah, he gave me direction and a purpose, and he challenged me to take the bar. He said, "Okay, you're pretty good at this immigration stuff. You understand it," and I did. I really was good at it. I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning, but he basically said, "Well, here's a case. You figure it out.
Learn, yeah.
Here are the law books. You figure it out." And I did that for a few months, and I liked it. I liked the people. I liked the diversity. We had Chinese paralegals, we had Japanese paralegals, we had Korean paralegals. We had all kinds of crazy characters in that office. It was a small firm. Um,
So it was kind of hard to work with him.
it was impossible to work with him, but he gave me a purpose and a challenge, and I did pass the bar. So then I was a lawyer, and yeah, I kind of had to move on from John because he just didn't have the capacity to retain me,
And you
and
went to Fragaman,
I went to Fragaman in
hmm
Oakland.
and that's
I
like the at the time the biggest like national
I think so. Yeah.
at the time. I don't know if they still are, but probably they're one of the top like largest
Right.
solely immigration or global migration law firms out there.
Yeah, it's big,
Yeah.
and but then 9/11 happened while I was in Oakland, and it changed the entire plan of Fragaman. We had a lot of layoffs. I survived that, but they closed the office, and I had to move to the San Francisco office, which is not far. But if you're commuting, um, it just became an hour and a half on the train in and an hour and a half on the train back because I couldn't afford to actually live there. Um, but I learned well a lot. Not just immigration, but also how does America function? Because now I actually had a real job. You know,
It wasn't like one day of plumbing, the
no,
next day of pizza making, the next day of, making, random films.
yeah,
Now
yeah,
all of a sudden you're actually doing a lot of like paperwork and learning about the bureaucracy of
yes,
this country and how this country either functions or doesn't.
yeah. It was very interesting, and maybe I wasn't appreciative enough of the opportunity because I felt I got kind of stuck there. I was an associate attorney, and there was no way up for me. At least that's how I felt, and so I kept looking of because maybe this is how it goes full circle, right? My grandfather sold razor blades and suspenders on the market. My dad had to make a life as a person who came back to Amsterdam with nothing, and I am the immigrant here. I was a hustler. And you got to make things happen. And I'm first generation immigrant in the U.S. And it's not like I came with a lot of money. I had not much, so not poor this time, by the way, but not crazy. And so I had to reinvent myself, and I hustled my way into a job in Phoenix where I started working because I had some experience in setting up global practices. So not just U.S. immigration, but global mobility. And that was kind of a new thing. So I'm in Phoenix, but after 4 or 5 months of being there, I realized that I had made a huge mistake. And I just didn't fit in with this corporate mentality. Again, probably didn't appreciate it at the time, but I felt used. I felt uh, that my integrity was questioned. Well, I didn't. I felt there were some dubious decisions that were being made. Clients were being duped. Um, Most of all, my colleagues were being taken advantage of, and so I quit. And that's how. And then I became my own boss in 2004 and ran my own business and didn't know a soul in Phoenix, let alone Tucson.
What brought you to Arizona? Was it just
That was the
because of
job.
that job? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm in Arizona. I don't know anybody, but I had promised my kids, or I promised my kids at that time when I quit.
Yeah.
I said, well, worst case scenario, I'll be back flipping hamburgers, but I'm not moving you during high school.
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
I made that promise to my kids. And then the immigration thing kind of worked out well. And I had some luck on the way. I had a Ninth Circuit case that got published, and because nobody wanted to take that case, and here I am again. Well, nobody wants to take a case. I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And you've done, is your focus more general as an immigration lawyer over the past several years? Or, I mean, I'm sure you do family based, employment based, and some other types of
well, I
cases.
I knew enough, having worked for John, who was kind of frustrated, not being the big firm like Fragaman was, and I knew enough to not to compete with Fragaman because I had just worked there. And so I started doing removal defense. I started doing really older cases that nobody wanted to touch. I would drive an hour and a half to Eloy in 115-degree heat and do detention work. And I loved it. I was this guy. I even had bought cowboy boots because I thought, okay, this is so new for me. This is such an adventure. And I'm going to go into the desert and I have to get cowboy boots and I'm going to help all these people getting out of detention. And I was successful doing it. I had balls at the time.
Yeah.
And I would just take it to the man. And I didn't care. And So I built a clientele really, really fast of people that felt they could trust me. Um, I mean, I wasn't ripping anybody off. I was really becoming friends with most of my clients, and I knew the families. And then from removal comes adjustment of status cases, green
And then it
cards,
just
and
grows.
then it just grew family based. And slowly, I started doing some more employment as well, because then
Build that
somebody owns a restaurant, they come to you, and then I had more and more Dutch clients also, because I'm the only Dutch speaking immigration attorney, I think, west of the Mississippi. And so I built a nice practice and learned a lot along the way. Um, and I'm not the same person that I was 30 years ago
Of
when I.
course,
No, but
we
it's
all.
really I'm a, that's why I'm saying I don't feel I was as appreciative at that time,
Yeah,
but it also is I was an angry young man,
sure. Well,
and
what do
I'm
you?
not
I
anymore.
mean, looking at your journey today, and we always talk about this like so-called American dream
Yeah.
in the land of opportunity. First off, do you feel like that this country has provided you with that and given you this I guess you would say kind of a blessing to be able to help others try to obtain that as well?
For a long time, I felt I was the facilitator of somebody else's American dream, and I felt a little left out because I thought, okay, I'm working really hard, and I have a good life, but I'm not really getting ahead. And I saw a lot of people in my practice that felt they were entitled to the American dream, and
Sure.
especially when you have a lot of European clients, uh,
A lot
they
of
are
privilege. Yeah,
a
you
lot of
expect it to
privilege,
be
lots
served
of
on a
that,
silver platter.
and um, but to be fair, now after having been here, and so the timing of this interview is interesting because now I feel yes, I am very thankful for what I've accomplished, and my kids are the second generation. Of course, their mom is American citizen, but
Sure.
still, they had to deal with all the ups and downs of.
Did they get dual citizenship?
Yes, yes, they
Okay.
are both, and they thrive right now.
Are they
And
both lawyers? Both of
my
them?
son is a lawyer,
Okay.
Ben, and my daughter is a landscape architect.
I want to read something really quick because I felt, this is the time where I make David maybe get teary eyed and cry.
Oh,
Um, but I think it's important to share this. And I think that if you listen to this, this will tell you just in a paragraph summary who David is. So his son Ben just was profiled with him in this attorney magazine. Was it for Colorado
I don't know.
attorney at law?
I
Well,
saw it come by. I don't
so he
know.
shared this with me, and I thought it was a beautiful testament to you. And Ben is a as an attorney now. He was potentially going to be what, a pitcher in baseball.
Yeah,
He was
yeah,
on track to maybe being a baseball player,
yeah.
but
It's
something
another sport I had to learn when I was here. I had never seen a baseball game in my life, but yeah, he was a
Well, the
left-handed
Dutch
pitcher.
have gotten better. I
Yeah,
mean, with Aruba and other countries, you're starting to see Xander Bogarts, and that they've actually done pretty well
oh,
in some
good.
of the World Baseball Classics. So Ben is an attorney at Messner Reeves in Denver, and he had said the following about you. Growing up around my father, I always marveled at his compassion, understanding, and tenacity when assisting his immigration clients. To his clients, he was not just a lawyer, he was a pillar of strength, a reminder that even if it seemed that hope was lost, he would do everything he could to provide a light at the end of the tunnel. And then he finishes up by saying, while I'll be focusing my practice on transactional law, in other
Yeah,
words,
smart
he
man.
wanted to deal with the same bullshit we deal with.
Right.
I will aim to be more than a lawyer, but a pillar of strength for my clients. And that's a testament to you
Thank
that
you.
he will do law the right way, which is, what we call values based lawyering, where you
Mhm.
do it for the right reasons. You make a living doing it, but you're not going to be the guy on the billboard who's like selling himself for like multi-million dollar personal injury cases. You're doing it because you care about your clients and you'll go to the limits for them. So there you go, David.
Thank
This
you.
is
Yeah.
not your eulogy.
Not yet.
but
No. No, and it has come full circle because as of a few days ago, I am actually working with Ben at Messner Reeves,
so there
and
you
that's
go.
when I say, when you ask me, did you get to experience the American dream? It's like, well, what better way to experience the American dream and than to work with your kid, and he
That's
still
amazing.
loves
Yeah.
you and likes you, and
And I worked with my mom too.
yeah, you
So
worked
it's
with
kind
your,
of
yeah,
a very similar type of connection there, in that we do have a lot of parallels in our
absolutely,
in our past and
yeah.
in different ways. We both like to use comedy and humor as a way of connecting, Holocaust stories, Jewish, so on, and working with our family members is, a big thing. And Rebecca, did she work with you for a little bit in your office
No,
or no? Okay.
no, she's never worked with me. The only experience she has with my work, well, not the only, she's seen me work, but I took her to the detention center in Eloy with her friends so they could experience what that was like to go to a concrete building and be held there and feel that, and then experience a hearing and all the anxiety that was going on with that. But she's then the one that uh, gets to the gate and goes like, "Oh, I didn't bring my ID."
And sent back to her car. Great.
Well, I talked her into the detention center somehow, which is totally dangerous because you had no ID. But they let her in as my daughter. I vouched for her. But that's her. That's her. Yeah. As much as she should be a lawyer, she should not be a lawyer. She is a great. Sorry.
A human.
Um, um, no, I'm joking. Actually, hang on.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll tell you a funny Eloy story.
Okay.
So I got this guy out of Eloy on a bond, and his it was his ex-wife, who he's still like friends with and had a relationship with. She had come to, be basically his sponsor and get him released. And after the hearing, he got released very quickly. I mean, it was one of the fastest I've ever seen somebody released. She was just sitting in her car, and we walked out, and she, this is the best. She's sitting in her car. He comes out with me, but she doesn't see him walking out with me, and he kind of like snuck around the other
Oh,
side, and I plotted with him. Uh, Even though they had separated and weren't together, they still had a loving relationship. So as we were walking out, I said, "Hey, you want to pull a prank on her?
oh
How
no.
about I walk out to the car and I tell her that as we were leaving, they decided to re-detain you,
Oh,
and they
that's
were
just so
not going to
mean.
release you." And so he was like, "That's going to be odd," because I've known this guy for a long time
Okay.
also, and I know he's a bit of a prankster. So I walk up to the car and I'm like, "I'm sorry, we were about to leave, and some guards came up and said he's not allowed to leave, and he's going to be there." And then he popped up and said,
Oh,
"Surprise!" And she was going to, oh my god, I thought she was going to run us both over in the
yeah, that
parking
is
lot.
terrible.
It was.
I mean, I don't know if your listeners know you're in the middle of the freaking
In the middle
desert.
of nowhere, desert. I mean, it was probably not the brightest, move by me, but you got to keep your clients sometimes on their toes.
Yeah, yeah, no,
And
wow,
he was in on it. So, and
yeah.
actually, I think it was his idea originally. I mean, obviously I could have talked a little bit of sense into him, but I didn't. So
I wouldn't make that same. I mean, it's fun,
I
but
wouldn't do that again, though. Now,
oh my
but
god, what we
you
have
have to know
going on
your
now.
audience.
Yeah,
So tell me, like you before you started choking,
yeah. Sorry, no, it's just my.
I actually have that same glass. I think is that Crate and Barrel glass. It
I
makes
don't know what it is.
yeah. Anyways, so what did you were talking about Rebecca
Well, yeah, she
and
became a
her?
landscape architect, and I think she
Okay,
should stay away from law, and because she is a great designer, she's
that's
very
awesome.
creative, and she loves what she's doing, and that is contributing in another way. And I mean, she really is very thoughtful about what the community wants, what sustainability is, and she's really trying to do things for the right, also for the right
Again,
reasons. Yeah,
values based
values based
architecture.
architect,
Yeah.
and I love that. And so when you ask me, have I achieved the American dream? I think that's what it is. It's not
It's
money.
your no.
It's just
What do you
the,
leave behind?
what you
What do
leave
we leave
behind
behind?
and what you can see in the next generation. And I'm
Hmm.
very proud of it. And
I mean, you
uh,
could build buildings, you could build skyscrapers,
you know,
but those are material. You
mhm.
know what I mean? What you leave behind and the legacy that you've shared and what the American dream has provided is that the next generation is is gaining that same opportunity, but also doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Now that takes me to my next question, which
Oh,
is do you see hope for our future in this
yes.
country
Yeah. I mean, if
and
I look
why?
at my own family now, the little family that I'm creating, we are creating a multicultural, diverse family. I mean, my son is married with Daniela, whose parents came here from Peru, and so I'm learning Spanish, and and we have some Iranian connection now too. So it is. Uh, yeah, it's coming full circle, and I think that as long as you have the energy to receive and give back to the community, and if we all do that together, and I see a lot more of it despite of what's going on nationally, I think on the local level I see a lot of community building right now
So you think from the grassroots
from the
things
ground
will
up.
get better?
Yes, I mean,
Because it's a
even
scary time right
it's a
now
very
with
scary time,
what's
and
happening.
I don't know when you broadcast this, but I mean, we're on the cusp of um, possibly a United States that's really on the wrong side of history,
Hmm.
together with Russia. And I mean,
And more
Bush talked
potential
about the axis
conflicts.
of
Yeah.
evil, and now we're
Now we're
becoming
part of
part of
that
the
axis
axis
of
of
evil.
evil.
Yeah.
And that is a very scary thought. And if that is really going to happen, yeah, then I don't see a lot of future. But if the American people are the American
Rise
people
up.
that I believe they
Yeah.
are, then we don't stand for that. We don't. We're not
Hmm.
evil people, and misguided maybe, and misinformed, but not evil.
It's
And
about
even the
educating people and
well, if I'm talking to the MAGA supporters in my
yeah.
neighborhood, they're just misinformed,
Yeah.
and they have been deliberately lied to about immigration, for instance, but not just immigration, about the EPA,
Healthcare
about
and yeah.
healthcare, about everything. And I don't know why they let themselves be lied to so much, but maybe that's another
That's a
conversation.
different
Oh,
discussion
that's
for
a
a
different
different
discussion.
podcast.
But I don't believe these people are evil. I see
Yeah.
them at the gym and I talk to them and they're nice people. They will help you when you have a problem.
But they're
They
misguided.
they
It's what
must
I
be.
mean. It's a lack of understanding on the most basic levels
You know,
of
so because
certain issues.
because I don't think they like kids in cages. I don't
Mhm.
think they like the fact that ICE will go into a farm, one of my clients, and uh, just round up the workers. That's not what people see. I mean, I think we maybe as immigration lawyers have not done a very good job explaining that it's a process, and I'm not advocating for more immigration. I'm not advocating for um, illegal behavior. I am advocating for empathy
And a
and
better process.
a
I mean, the
better
problem
process.
is we don't have a good.
Right.
So when you have a bad process, it forces everyone to do things the
Yeah.
other way,
And
which
if you
is
have a bad
not the right
process
way.
by design, that is
Mhm.
what's really,
So having compassion is it's a I think at the end of the day, having empathy and compassion and also having a better system and process in place are two of the key pillars
yeah.
of our what would make the system maybe more functional in the long run.
Yeah. And I think the American dream, if you come back to that, is part of that process. I mean, it has to be fair to everybody. And I think on a national level, uh, they are getting away from that on purpose. Um, and the only way to build that back up is from the ground up. And I believe in that will work because everybody that I talk to now um, understands more, seems to go like, oh, no, this is not what we wanted. We didn't want all those federal workers that were inspecting the mines to be fired. That was not a good plan. So it's not immigration alone. I think, but that's why I'm thinking we can also agree that I'm not I have a family and I may have little kids run around at some point. If they catch the guy that is the predator and he gets because he's a child killer or
Yeah.
whatever or a rapist, sure, yes, I'm very conservative. I don't want that person walking around in my street.
Mhm.
But that's not what ICE is after.
No,
And especially
everybody is a criminal,
everybody's a criminal. And
and that
now
makes us less safe as a society because then you're not targeting the
the real
true
criminals.
evil
Yeah.
elements, you
And
know.
then when they are, and this was happened last week, and I don't know how much time you have, but when they are creating this registration requirement again, which has been on the books for 65, no, 85 years, but you make that a crime now, and you're creating criminals, and you're selling it to the public as, oh yeah, see, these people are
Safety,
criminals, and
security. Yeah.
so now we should detain all of those people because they have committed a crime by not registering. That's all they didn't do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's horrific because um, you're creating more opportunity for real criminals.
Exactly. And not again, when we talk about government efficiency and waste, you're
Yeah,
creating more waste than necessary by just having people out there constantly, in a police state, you know, looking into everyone's homes or their businesses
yeah,
or whatnot. I mean,
yeah.
and I don't think, the average American wants that. I
I
think
don't
the
think
average
so either because
American
they're
wants
gonna.
their privacy and their protections
Yeah,
and they're going to realize that their protections and those rights that they are so drawn to could easily be impacted by a hyper police state, and all of a sudden it's, hey, I didn't mean me that they should go after. I meant
exactly.
that other
Yeah,
person.
and that's already happening,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
so that's where I see hope for sure.
Well, I think, the more I know you've, kind of tinkered with retiring and you've, dealing with the stress of all this,
Sure.
you know, I think that it is important that we take care of ourselves, number one, and live a long life, that a long enough life that
Yeah.
you feel fulfilled. But I just hope that you can continue doing this work in the capacity that you are, um, and and it's important because there's just not enough lawyers out there who fill the void of immigration law. It's a small, relatively small,
It's a small
you know,
community.
community.
Well, I can tell you, I have been working with Messner Reeves for a few days now. I'm not doing a plug here, but I have been so re-energized
Yeah, well, that's
working with
good.
young people who have similar belief systems and who want to help. Not only young people, but also seasoned criminal defense lawyers that see what's going on. They say, "Well, I've never done a criminal or an immigration case in my life, but let me
I've
know.
tried
I'll
a pro
help.
bono or
I'll
something. Yeah,
help." And
and that's a culture that it gets bred from the top down with a
yeah,
law office like that. That's
and
good.
that's really fun to see, and that's why I'm hopeful. And I do think we'll have a different kind of Congress in 2026. And uh, yeah, I think there's going to be a young, new generation in that Congress that is not going to be afraid.
Or maybe some 50 somethings. We'll see.
Well, they're still young.
So, David, I am going to end on that note because we could go on
Yeah,
forever.
I would
And
love to talk
God
to you
knows
more.
most people would have stopped listening about 40 minutes in, probably.
Yeah,
But, we've gone over an hour. So, thank you for joining me.
thanks, Mo.
Um,
I really enjoyed it.
and thank you to Emma, my
Thanks, Emma.
16-year-old who produces the show. And,
We didn't
and
really
I,
talk about immigration, but maybe a bit.
Nah, but the idea like I told you, the idea behind my podcast was to do a more human based discussion, like
Yeah.
your story, and your response to me was, well, my story's not that interesting. And I was like, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, well, I think you said that to
Yeah,
me. I
I
mean,
did. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, wait a minute, you have the most interesting immigration story that I've come across so
Oh,
far. I
thanks.
mean, with all the bizarre jobs you've done, and so yes, thank you very much.
Thanks,
I'm
Mo.
honored to have you on here.